6:34, good morning to you. We've been asking all weekend, actually, for pictures of your Christmas trees because, frankly, why not?
Yes, because it cheers us all up. Sarah has sent in this lovely one.
Oh, very nice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that really is pretty.
Very cosy, with the white lights.
Remember to tell us where you live.
Yes,
because
please.
That's just Sarah, but Sarah, we don't know where you live.
Yeah, the same goes for May. We don't know where you are, May. But she said this is...
I like
very
that.
white.
Very nice.
I say white. It's not. It's because the room's white.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
a white room.
It looks very compact, doesn't it? But
It does. Lots of glitter, very fancy like this. Tracy is in Lincoln. Good morning. Has sent this in, which is a beautiful tree.
That's fab.
Very nice. But again, the white lights are a big thing.
Yeah, well, that's the ones. And finally, this is Stephen's. Oh, Stephen, that's beautiful.
Do you like? See, I told you we like coloured lights.
Hang on a minute. What have you got at the bottom of the tree?
So they're Christmas presents.
But
They light up.
They're all lit up.
Yeah.
Oh, are they real presents?
No.
Oh, I see.
Oh. No, but it's just to disguise.
I didn't know you could get those.
Yeah, it's just to disguise the, with the pot with all the trees in and all the, you have to water every day.
I like that. Very
there
nice.
You go.
What's at the top?
An angel.
An angel. Yes, it looks like an angel.
Oh, have you sent? Have you submitted it?
Well, my 3-year-old made me buy a tree yesterday. It's a little one, but it's a real tree and it's got lights on and everything. So it's on Twitter. So I'll have to pull it off.
Oh, please pull it. Yeah, and we'll show everything.
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
So there you go. We're very
small.
We're very pleased with it. As you can see, writer and columnist Emma Wolfe is here alongside the broadcaster Ella Whelan. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Before we have a chat, let's just run you through the front pages, should we?
Well, the Sunday Telegraph lead with Sir Keir Starmer appealing, apparently, to Conservative voters by piling praise upon Margaret Thatcher.
Sunday Times has Rishi Sunak planning to give Rwanda another £15 million to secure an immigration treaty.
The Observer report on Israel using intelligence gleaned from apparently hundreds of Hamas prisoners to find the top commanders still alive inside Gaza.
The Sunday Express has the King refusing to disown Prince Harry over the royal race row. And the Daily Star lead with Brits facing the coldest winter in 10 years. It is a polar excess. Ah, very, very clever.
Good
so
headline.
Let's see what Emma and Ella have got for us this morning. Ella, we'll start with you, should we, in the Sunday Telegraph. Keir Starmer piling praise on Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, well, making an intervention on immigration, which is, he's obviously attempting to make hay while the sun shines, as the Conservatives are in a real row over the Rwanda policy. They seem to be, well, they don't just seem to be, they are unable to make any headway in relation to that whole debate about small boats and the immigration system and the asylum system. His article says, voters have been betrayed on Brexit and immigration. I stand ready to deliver. The first part of that headline will, I think, still probably make a lot of people smirk, because Keir has been working so hard to try and convince people that he didn't really mean it when he did all that campaigning around Brexit previously. But the paper picks up on the fact that he does something which I think most people won't be surprised at, which is to praise Thatcher, talking about the fact that she set loose our natural entrepreneurialism. He compares, talks about Thatcher, Clement Attlee, Sir Tony Blair, saying that they all realise that politics must act in service of the British people rather than dictating to them. And, he's always set himself particularly alongside Blair, but trying to position himself in that tradition of sensible, reasonable, not too kind of shaking the boat. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think, for me, it comes across as what Labour has almost always been recently, which is very, very close to the Conservatives, not very remarkable. And actually, there's nothing, say whatever about Jeremy Corbyn and previous sort of Labour governments, Labour Party sort of arrangements, this sort of move to the right is how the Telegraph calls it, but I think more to the centre, isn't very exciting.
But that's how you win elections.
Perhaps it's how you win elections, but I think there's something going to be different about next year, which is that the way in which the times that we live in are coloured is by stagnation, is by nothing happening, and is by a kind of feeling of frustration. And I think what people might want is something to break out of that. And this whole harking back to people who are dead or people who are elected out a long time ago isn't going to work.
If you're a frustrated Tory voter, and there are a lot of them by the feel of it, then it's understandable that Keir Starmer would try and reach out to them in some way.
Yeah, this is very much what this is about. I mean, the idea that he's quoting Thatcher, and then Attlee has sort of made my coffee jump out of my hand a little bit there, and Blair as well. But it's very much about pitching for these disillusioned Conservative voters. It's really about the centre ground and then mopping up, because he's really aware that lots of disillusioned Conservative voters are going to be thinking, well, what's my option? Reform? You know, and that's where it starts to get dangerous when you start splitting the vote in that way. So, you know, Starmer is reminding voters about immigration, about inflation and about crime, the three key areas that he sees the Conservatives as failing on. And Conservative MPs are not happy about this because they know they've failed in immigration. Labour have, in the last few days, been reminding people that if this weekend, freezing cold, bitter cold out there, if this weekend sees another surge in Channel crossings, can you imagine crossing in a small boat in those icy waters this weekend?
I would have thought we're bound to see fewer, but they may still
he's saying this will be the second highest year of illegal entry on record, and so he's really pushing that as well.
We also need to bear in mind, I think, with this, because it makes for a good headline about sort of praising Margaret Thatcher. One of the first things Gordon Brown did as Prime Minister was invite Margaret Thatcher to number 10.
That's right.
If you remember.
Yeah.
And don't forget when the whole election thing, when it was actually Gordon Brown versus, well, Nick Clegg and David Cameron, all the discussion was who is the heir to Blair? And David Cameron was seen as heir to Blair. So it works both ways.
So it's not exactly new. That's a really good point. Yeah, it does. And it's all sort of centre but a little bit lefter or a little bit righter.
Yeah.
Those were the debates where everybody agreed with Nick.
Everyone agreed with
I agree with Nick. And the Golden Tie, do you remember?
Which is like the Golden Time is the worst time in politics from my perspective. That kind of just backslapping sort of samey approach, which, you know, all the issues that you cover on this show, from housing to people not being able to heat their homes to, you know, food prices, everything. It's clear that, Keir Starmer says in his article, The Telegraph, nothing happens in this country, you can feel frustrated. So what's their answer? More of the same.
But it's also partisan, isn't it? If you had someone who was very, very socialist, they would then alienate the other side. It's just...
Well, which is what we saw with Jeremy Corbyn.
Absolutely. Exactly. I mean, there were other issues around Jeremy Corbyn as well, but you're right, it's so hard to
But the party was unelectable, didn't it? That's what everybody more or less agreed. That then it was unelectable. And they're all saying now Keir Starmer has now made the Labour Party electable.
He has.
That's quite something. Whether it's enough, you don't know.
No.
You were looking at the Times, and this extraordinary, well, it raised our eyebrows, this Rwanda deal. They're going to actually plough more money.
More money.
£15 million, I think.
So we've,
into something that hasn't yet worked and by the Supreme Court is deemed wrong.
It's been deemed illegal, basically. You can't do this. So we've already sent 140 million out to Rwanda as part of this policy to try and make it more acceptable to the Court of Human Rights. And now we're going to send another 15 million. To be fair, this is a sort of a forward payment on money that we were already going to send. I think the charitable way of describing this is sending good money after bad, but I think basically they're flogging a dead horse. This policy is not going to work.
Unless...
And if we spent... Sorry, Stephen.
No, I was going to say, unless... This is about the treaty, isn't it? And this is about and I don't understand the politics of it.
This is not going to make Rwanda a more acceptable place.
No, but it might make it
overturn.
But it might. But if there is a treaty, you can bypass the ruling. Won't overturn the ruling. You can bypass it, and that's what they're going for.
OK, and then by this point we will have spent nearly 200 million on sending how many? Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands at most. But however many people we ever manage to get on a plane, off a runway, to Rwanda, which I very much doubt is ever going to happen, even at that point, it would be ludicrously costly, utterly pointless. I mean, what are we doing spending this much money on a failed policy and then pursuing it?
I think the important thing is that, obviously, you know, the issue of Rwanda and the failure of that policy is sort of just I know it's not small, but it's sort of a small symptom of a much bigger problem, which is that I think the Conservative Party thinks if we can just get, you know, as Suella Braverman in her time literally said, if we can just get planes off the runway, everything will be fine. Right. You know, and they imagine that if they can just bypass this and just manage to get this signed off, everything will go quiet. Of course, that's not the case, because the problem with the system of asylum and the system of immigration, legal immigration is included in this. The whole mess of how we deal with people coming to this country is very complicated, and it comes down to sort of boring issues like inabilities in departments of government to, answer emails, to file properly, to do the work, right up to a sort of an ideological inability to grapple with the fact that people, there's a nuanced discussion around immigration. People want borders to be controlled. They want to see the system to be working. But that doesn't necessarily mean they want to pack off loads of people to places that are, either, if you want to argue that, have questionable human rights records, fine, but also just to be a sort of, to have a sort of, not an anti-immigrant sentiment, but just sort of keep them out sentiment.
It's not even a deterrent.
But we don't know that yet.
People have spoken to people trying to cross, and they're not bothered by that. They don't think it'll work. They know that the government can't get them off to Rwanda.
But we don't really know it's not a deterrent yet, because it hasn't worked. Happened.
And what about
if it actually does happen, it may prove to be a deterrent. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the point, isn't it?
May, yeah. I mean, I would say 100% not, but yeah, no, you're right. It may. I don't think it will, because people know you can disappear into the system. They know that they can come here and delay and delay and delay and appeal and all of that. And they've seen it failing. I mean, they're not idiots. The people traffickers that are getting people over here, the ones who are coming over illegally. But Ella's right. The legal migration is also a huge issue. I'm not saying it's a problem, but it's a huge issue in terms of, what do we have? 700 and something thousand people coming to this country. So we have to talk about all these things, and this obsession with Rwanda is utterly misjudged.
Yeah. OK, let's have a look, Ella, at The Observer this morning. Rishi Sunak is a hypocrite, apparently, at COP28 for wanting a phase-out of fossil fuels, as opposed to what? Just switching it off?
Yeah, he's certainly not having a good time at his conference, is he? I mean, aside from people thwarting him with ties and things like that, he's now, he's in this very difficult position, which is that domestically, he's been saying what I think are the right things, or moving towards the right position, which is, no, we're not just going to turn off the lights. We've got to have, some kind of sensible policy around making sure that people have cheap and easily accessible energy, whether that's, the plans around North Sea oil and gas and changing licensing. I think most people had a sigh of relief hearing that, because the changes in order to sort of completely ditch fossil fuels would mean a dramatic shift in our quality of life, a dramatic shift in our energy bills and all the rest of it. But obviously you go to somewhere like COP28 where you're meant to say to Al Gore and all these big statesmen and wonderful people, of course I promise I am Mr. Green and I'm going to do everything that's right. And there is a clash. And I think actually, Sunak needs to find his sort of mettle, needs to find his guts to be able to go to rooms of these unelected sort of bureaucrats and sort of celebrities at this point, and say, actually, I care more about the people who vote me in and the populace and the public of my country than I do about these sort of parties in Dubai. Keir Starmer was there as well. Obviously, the papers have picked up, the Observer's picked up that he spent a lot more time than Sunak. I think after the Thai incident, Sunak just wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. But, remember that Keir Starmer said, yes, I much prefer, where would you prefer, at home or Davos? Where do you feel more comfortable? And he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said something like, oh, absolutely Davos. He's much more comfortable in these kind of rooms of technocrats than he is dealing with awkward people at home that might say to him, well, hang on a minute, what does that policy mean for me being able to keep the lights on? So there is a tension, but I think people who actually see the reality of what net zero and these sort of plans mean for ordinary people need to have the guts to say it where it matters. And need to have the guts to say it where it's going to have influence on an international
the fact
stage.
is, when you are the Prime Minister, so you are having to take big decisions that affect people's livelihoods, you've got to think ahead. But Keir Starmer doesn't need to think that yet. He can be more idealistic in opposition, can't you? Actually, it's interesting thinking of green things. That reminded me, if anyone's got an electric car, apparently I was talking to somebody yesterday who's got one and nearly ran out of power and was really worried that they had enough power to get to to a service station. And when he got to the service station, I mean, he didn't have enough power to get home, basically. When he got to the service station, there was a every single power charger thing was taken up, and there were 20 cars in a queue waiting.
Oh.
So he knew that, and frankly, he was even worried that if he had to sit there in a queue waiting forever, he wouldn't have enough power to actually go to the pump or whatever you call it. Yeah. And it's that bad. The infrastructure isn't there yet properly for electric cars, because apparently in the winter, in the dark and the cold yesterday, you use up much more electricity, much more fast, because you're using your battery power to keep all those things on. So
and batteries don't operate as well in the cold.
No, it's really difficult for drivers of electric cars at the moment.
But get the infrastructure in. I quite fancy an electric car next time.
You wouldn't want one yet, because you drive a long way.
Yeah, but you do need the infrastructure.
You've got the, what do they call it? Charge anxiety.
Yeah.
Can we have a look at the Observer, Emma? Looking at the Israel-Gaza
It is,
situation.
and we know that now Israel are really focusing on this push into southern Gaza, where already a humanitarian crisis is unfolding. You've got thousands of people there.
How do they do that without moving people out?
A dense area, tiny area, 4 miles across, something like that. They're running out of food and fuel and basic amenities and water and everything. So this Israeli push is very much focused on capturing hundreds of militants and using that. They're trying to use that intelligence to very much track down the Hamas leaders in the belief that that is the way to eliminate Hamas as an organisation. And as many people have said, Hamas is not just an organisation; it's an ideology. And actually, many of these fighters are orphans, and they've been orphaned in conflict over the years. And many more young men and young people are being made orphans by this conflict. And I'm not defending either side; I'm absolutely not. But I'm just saying, you don't eliminate Hamas in any way. You don't eliminate them by taking out a few leaders. And how is this going to work? And as you say, as you refer to, Stephen, how do you hit and repeatedly hit an area which is densely packed with civilians without catastrophic
and it's densely packed with civilians who they told to go south.
They've been told.
They've been told to go south, and those who are in the south now are finding themselves under bombardment. And where are they meant to go?
Absolutely
They've
terrifying.
got nowhere to go.
They've got nowhere to go, and as I say, they've got essential supplies running out, and the terror of living under that kind of 24/7 threat and fear of bombardment, as well as all the other traumas they've been through. I mean, these people have survived, what is it now, over 2 months of this, being shunted from one area to another, and it's really, really frightening. The situation. I mean, you know, the ceasefire's petered out, and here we go again. Seemingly very little achieved apart from the hostages, which are a wonderful thing. That anybody that has been released, I celebrate as an innocent life that's been liberated. But
it's very hard to know what to. I wouldn't like to be Israel, because you have a existential threat that's ongoing to the very soul of your nation and the safety of your people. You have a self-professed Jew-hating death cult, which has, written within its founding documents the desire to wipe you off the face of the planet. It seems impossible to ignore that. You would be... Any other nation would agree that you would have to try to eliminate that threat. And so I think most people, well, I say most people, most decent people know that Hamas is not a force that can be reasoned with, reckoned with, or made to compromise. On the other hand, there is the very practical and serious issue both of people, civilians dying in the region, but also with tensions in the Middle East being as such that the further displacement happens, the further that refugee camps get set up in different areas and people's lives are destroyed. That has over decades caused groups like ISIS or Hamas to be able to find support among ordinary people. But there is no... I think the thing that people sort of misunderstand with trying to paint this issue as goodies and baddies and make a kind of very black and white distinction is that there might be a very clear distinction around Hamas, but in terms of the outcome of this war, there is no easy answers, and there is no
solution.
No.
Can we have a look at this one, which I find frustrating as someone who, in the face of sometimes a lot of opposition, tries to foster a bit more understanding of the trans community. To launch tampons for men just seems, in terms of marketing and how we try and address an issue, just seems to be just the wrong way forward.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example of how particularly companies decide that they're going to speak on behalf of trans people and make campaigns on behalf of trans people. And in actual fact, most people who have transitioned or of different genders or whatever get on with their lives sort of in quiet peace if they can, and are not the same as sort of the screaming activist arguments that happen on Twitter and things like that. But this Finnish company has released a new sanitary product which they have called tampons for men. Now this takes some explanation. What it is sanitary products for people who were biological women who have now transitioned and call themselves trans men. So presumably, I don't know, but presumably people who still have periods and need to use tampons. And the box says tampons for men, and around the corner it's wrapped says menstruation. And the idea is trying to destigmatise periods for people with different genders. And the problem with this is that, as I see it, number one, most people know that it's women who get periods. And if you've tried to and want to become a man, I would imagine that you don't have that much interest in the biological functions of women anymore. And actually you want to be, you're not interested in that. So the sort of fetishization of periods and making it this sort of thing that you have to celebrate.
There will still be people who are at a point in transition when they are still
menstruating, which is,
but why you wouldn't just buy
ordinary tampons?
Yeah, I don't
think tampons are even marketed. I mean, they are marketed for women in the terms of their pink and everything, but I don't think they say for women.
Well, they're not. They're yellow and green, and I mean, they're
blue.
That's the kind of thing that
the colours are determined by the sort of severity of your period. It's too early to get into this, but
is this company just virtue signalling, or are they just doing it to make headlines?
I think that it's become a very sort of your position on trans issues has become a means through which you sort of signify whether you're a good or bad person or not. And actually it has very little interest in what trans people need and want, and also they've got a wider discussion about health.
OK, look, good to see you both this morning. Let's go check on the weather.